So what build are you? I'm gonna tell you right now, if you're some kind of shifty dex weasel, I'm gonna crush you with raw power. No. No? Alright. Strength, my kind of guy. No. What? No? What did you max then? Intelligence. Intelligence? Oh, great. So you're a casual, filthy mage. No. In a mundane tech-based world, firearms are nothing special, right? I mean, they're still pretty cool, but when any random redneck grandma can whip one out at any time, takes away a little bit from the uniqueness. If, on the other hand, you're in a world where the arms and armor are largely medieval-ish, having a gun is quite a big deal. So that's a good way to create a character that stands out and is badass in a different kind of way. Now, a lot of people claim that firearms are cowardly, especially compared to melee weapons. But if we think about it, is a firearm really any more cowardly in a world where you have rogues skulking in the dark, critical backstabbing your kidneys, and when mages can incinerate you from a distance or summon a horde of skeletons to do their bidding? I mean, is a gun really that cowardly? Come on. And of course, there are many, many ways to design fantasy weapons, including firearms. This might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I think the least appealing way to design a fantasy firearm is to slap some crazy geometric shapes together with all kinds of serrations and curves and spiky bits sticking out and a bunch of extra parts that eventually starts looking like something that has been just welded together from a bunch of recycled metal until it becomes this chimera of weird balance and anti-ergonomics. A better way to go about it, in my opinion, is to look at historical designs, particularly somewhat obscure ones, maybe something that was always rare or didn't actually work that well at the time, and modify it into something that looks cool and is still pretty convincing. A really good example of this, of taking a historical design and turning it into a really cool, badass firearm in a fantasy design, is Percival de Rolo's pepperbox.
That thing's badass.
This is from the animated series The Legend of Vox Machina, which is a D&D group played by professional voice actors. And if you haven't seen this show yet, I highly, highly recommend it. The pepperbox is a real historical firearm from the 19th century, and quite an interesting one at that. Some people call it a proto-revolver, which arguably isn't quite accurate, because you can say it has more in common with volley guns, and multi-barrel firearms have been common in the 16th century, and cruder versions existed even before that, so they do have a long history. Those generally fired either all barrels at once or in rapid succession, whereas the pepperbox does rotate, so you fire one barrel at a time. So in this case you have 6 shots, but there are also other versions. Some of them have a remarkable number of barrels, like this 18-shot pepperbox, which is pretty nuts. It requires less precision than a revolver, because with a revolver, you have to align the chamber in the cylinder with the bore. If it's even just slightly misaligned and you fire, the bullet will hit the frame, at least partially, which can of course be quite dangerous to the user and will also most likely destroy the firearm. With a pepperbox, it's not as much of an issue because every chamber is also the barrel. Percy's pepperbox is a little bit different, unsurprising in a world full of magic, and it has a, shall we say, occult origin. I'm gonna avoid spoilers for this one. What distinguishes it from real 19th century pepperboxes is the position of the hammer, or rather hammers. It has 2 for an unknown reason. On real ones, you generally have a hammer on top of the firearm in the center that moves up and down as you pull the trigger. It's double action, meaning as you pull the trigger, the barrels rotate So it rotates toward the next one, and meanwhile the hammer lifts and falls down to strike the primers on the nipple. So each of these barrels has a nipple that you have to place a percussion cap on, which is what ignites the charge, the powder in the barrel. There are also some under hammer pepper boxes where you have a hammer that sits above the trigger, often a ring trigger. As you pull the trigger back, you cock that hammer and it strikes the percussion cap at the bottom there. I actually got an antique pepper box once to make videos about, but unfortunately that didn't work out because the condition turned out to be too bad to be actually functional. The internals were too worn out, so it didn't rotate and index properly, and the hammer spring was apparently too weak to set off percussion caps, so that didn't work out. I should have still at least shown it on camera. I just sold it before making any video about it because I wanted to actually fire it and show it in action. Oh well, either way, here are pictures of it. That's what it looked like. The design of Percy's pepper box seems to be flintlock inspired, even though it's not quite that. The hammer looks sort of like that, even though there's clearly no flint attached to it. And it does spark when it drops, even though there is really no frizzen that we can see, or a pan that would hold the powder, etc. If you don't know how flintlock firearms work, by the way, I made a video about the Brown Bess, link down below so you can check that out, where I explain exactly how this works and everything and demonstrate it. So in this case, he's got two hammers. From what I can tell, only one usually drops and fires, even though the other one is functional too. I have no idea what's up with that. And the most interesting part here, he actually has a speed loader, something that more modern revolvers use. Could you do this with a pepper box? That's an interesting question. The issue is a pepper box is a muzzle loader. So you have to load each barrel individually by pouring down the powder and pushing the lead ball or bullet down and seating it. And then you need to prime it. This is where you have either a touch hole or a nipple, which connects to the chamber. So you need a percussion cap or something that sparks, that sets off that charge. The problem is the speed loader isn't long enough to reach all the way down there. So the way he uses it, it looks like when he releases it with a twist that the cartridges just fall into the barrel, which would be a problem because that means they can fall out if you tip it down. That's why real muzzle loaders use either a patched ball or a tightly fitting bullet that you actually have to push down with some force to make sure that it sits tightly enough that it can't just fall out, or worse, move forward just a little bit, because if there is a gap between the powder and the bullet, you've just created a pipe bomb. This is how it can blow up. So is there any way you could do that with a pepper box? Well, maybe. What I would like to see on this would be those two protruding metal pieces on the side be used as handles in some kind of spring-loaded plunger system, perhaps, where you have extending ramrods, basically, that come out and go past the length of this and can push the load, so the bullet and the powder, all the way down to the barrel. By the way, these can't be metal cartridges because there's no way to eject them after you fired. So this could be something like a paper cartridge perhaps, or even caseless ammo perhaps, like the volcanic pistol uses, where you have a hollow part of the bullet that's filled with powder. The drawback of that is that this is pretty anemic because it limits the amount of powder quite drastically, so it's not going to hit very hard, and his clearly does. So paper cartridge is plausible, or an alchemic cartridge, which I've seen mentioned. I'm not a D&D player, so I don't know exactly if this is really part of the rule system officially. I found one note saying that this is not really official, but on a Pathfinder site, it does seem like firearms can be used regularly. Either way, in this world, in Legend of Vox Machina, it seems like he's the only one who has a firearm. So there are a number of ways in which this could work without cases, a number of potential priming systems, particularly if you have all kinds of other substances and materials that don't exist in our world. So that's not a problem. One thing irks me a little bit here, which is This design has a metal rod going around the barrels of the firearm. This could be great in solving one particular problem, which is that on a pepperbox, you can't have sights. Okay, you could technically put a front sight on each one of the barrels. It's not ideal, but you could. But in this case, there could be a front sight on it. The thing actually has a rear sight, but not a front sight, which makes the rear sight useless. You need to align those to be actually able to aim. So there needs to be a front sight on this bar, because this way it doesn't move around. So that would make perfect sense. And also the bar could add as sort of an improvised heat shield, because after you've fired those barrels a number of times, they'll get hot. So this would be a way to hold on to it without having to touch the hot barrels. So this is quite a good design, really. It's just lacking a front sight. I don't know why, and it bothers me. Anyway, this is enough overthinking for now. Either way, this is one badass weapon, unique as well. This is also my favorite character in the series. He's got a lot going on, and it's just pretty interesting to be the only one with a functional firearm in a world like that, where everybody else fights with melee weapons or bows or crossbows and magic, etc. So good job on that. Quite like that. And as I said, if you haven't watched The Legend of Vox Machina yet, by all means, do so. Thanks for watching, and have a good one, folks.